Oh, there it is. Okay, we are live. What's up, wrestling fans? This is the Two Bros Wrestling Show on a very special night. Kevin, how you doing, brother?
It is a very special night, both day of the week and occasion. Normally, we'd come at you on a Sunday, but Doug, we did not want to interfere with everyone's football, so
Go
we are
sports
here
ball.
on Valentine's Day. It
Indeed, we
actually worked
are,
out, especially considering what our topic is tonight. Our main event topic is the Wrestling Bromance.
bro.
Bro. But as always, later on, we're going to talk match of the week, botch of the week, performer of the week. But before we do any of that, Doug,
Ooh,
we got news.
nothing really happened this week, did it? Nothing really comes
You
to
know,
mind.
compared to prior weeks, maybe not so much, but we'll start tonight with a continued fallout of The Rock's return, how it's affected the Cody Rhodes Roman Reigns storyline. New info that we have since our last show is that the deal for Rock to face Roman Reigns actually was made weeks before the Royal Rumble. Why they didn't just insert Rock into the Rumble and let him win the Rumble, I have no idea. That's anyone's guess, but apparently the $30 million a year deal that brought Rock on to the TKO board of directors not only included ownership of his name and all that cash, but it also included this WrestleMania main event with his cousin. Despite being highly anticipated, though, for years, the way it was done and what that meant for Cody has continued to receive backlash, and the "We Want Cody" hashtag backlash, Doug, that WWE is now owning and spinning into story itself.
So this whole situation is so bizarre because there's so much just commotion behind the scenes and just a lot of scuttle about who knew what, when they knew what happened, when it actually happened, which leads to so many more questions. You know, yeah, I have to ask: is this a smokescreen? If not intentional, they're at least running with it to take some heat off other WWE news. Maybe, you know,
If the idea is to move that off the front page, they did so.
yes,
Whether it
indeed,
was
they did.
intentional or not, definitely don't look over there, look over here, ended up working for them.
It
Um,
totally has worked because not only has it got me to recognize Cody, but there's just some really intriguing TV and some intriguing storylines, and like we were saying before we went on the air, I think we're both hooked now, regardless of what the story is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're hooked.
You're 100% correct on that. And the whole who knew what when is almost as intriguing as the story that's playing out on screen.
Mm-hmm.
And to that end, the Wrestling Observer reported that the whole deal with Rock having that WrestleMania match baked into his contract was the plan, but supposedly, at least according to the Observer, was not known by Cody Rhodes at the time. In fact, it was only known
Mm-hmm.
by Nick Khan and Ari Emanuel, amongst maybe a very few others going into Rumble, which makes it even more curious that they didn't just go ahead and change Rumble plans. A lot of twists
Right.
and turns that we still have to follow. And like you said, we're hooked. We're going to follow it.
Yeah, and then they've got this kid that works for the $7 gravy, like, or $7 or whatever it is, Rock's production company that used to be a head writer for WWE, who is basically on site for all of Rock's segments and back, in case we need to inject a Rock led creative allegedly, in at any given time.
Now the twists and
What's going
turns, at
on?
least headline match right now that they're advertising is we're back to Roman versus Cody, but that obviously is still subject to change too. So stay tuned to the Two Bros Wrestling Show. We'll follow along with you guys.
Stay tuned, indeed. This I'm sure deserves its own show, or at least a major segment going forward before we hit WrestleMania. But I'm sure we'll get there.
We will get there. Doug, pivoting to a completely different topic, Japanese
Super
women's
pivot.
wrestling promotion Stardom has fired Rosie Agawa, the man who co-founded the company in 2010 and has served as its creative head since New Japan Pro Wrestling's parent company, Bushido Road, bought the Stardom promotion back in 2019. Stardom's explanation for the move was that Ogawa had been poaching talent and staff, though they didn't provide any specifics as to who was poached and to where. We can connect the dots, however, thanks to the always quiet on social media Tony Khan, who took to his socials immediately with a series of Twitter storms praising the move and rejoicing about Rosie's firing, hinting very strongly that the poaching was being done for WWE. Kairi Sane is one talent that was recently in Stardom and then, of course, moved over back to WWE. WWE supposedly has interest in a multitude of other Japanese women superstars, but again, there is no direct correlation that's been made to WWE being the reason for the firing outside of Tony Khan's insinuations. Whatever the real story is here, though, this is going to have a ripple effect throughout the world of women's wrestling because Ogawa was a very major figure, a big power broker in that world. So more to come on that. I don't know what to make, Doug, of Tony Khan's insinuations, but apparently he's had some issues and he's blamed Ogawa for them.
So isn't there a Stardom talent that is delaying her start with WWE now to help him start a new company or a new production company or a new promotion in Japan before she comes over and joins WWE now? It seems like I read this story somewhere this week. You know, he's
that
gone
sounds familiar.
and
Yeah.
I don't remember her name, but so it's interesting that Tony calls them out, and then there's a WWE talent that is able to delay her start date to help a guy who just got fired for allegedly poaching talent from someone.
Obviously, the women's Japanese wrestling scene is an entire scene in and to itself,
Sure.
as opposed to American promotions, which outside of WOW are all mixed gender. So if you are looking for a pipeline of talent, the Japanese scene is where you'd go. And apparently that pipeline, at least in Tony Khan's opinion, has been blocked and gone only one way. But we'll see if that changes. Lots of talent over there.
The big old Levesque clogging it up, and it's only going one way. So.
Big old Levesque. All right. Speaking of, let's talk speaking of, obviously, the man's father-in-law has been the one, hogging all the wrestling legal headlines. But because of Vince McMahon's troubles, it's easy to forget that. Did you know, Doug, Vince McMahon isn't the only wrestling personality who has legal issues going on?
What?
I know. It actually extends beyond that. Do you seem to remember like half of FTR like waving a gun around in traffic?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Exactly. We all kind of forgot about that. But, the prosecutors in Orange County, Florida, apparently have not forgotten. In fact, the news, it's the first news on this incident in months now. But we do know that the county prosecutors have decided to pursue the case of the alleged road rage incident, which occurred last summer. A hearing is set for just a few days from now, February the 20th. If convicted, Wheeler could face up to 5 years in prison for aggravated assault with a firearm. Other potential punishments include 5 years probation and a $5,000 fine.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that, but we will continue to follow up. Obviously, we got the hearing. We'll report on here how all that goes.
All right.
Jacob Fatu is now a free agent, so we can get some more blood in the bloodline. The former MLW World Champion finished up with promotion at its recent pay-per-view. The news was broke by Fatu's uncle Rikishi. That's right. If you didn't know, still more bloodline out there. If you can see all the small print on the Rocks family tree when you throw it up, Fatu is on there.
let me tell you. So Ollie Davis from Wrestle Talk did a really good breakdown of the actual Samoan bloodline and the Samoan dynasty. It is insane. And
It
I
is
do not
insane.
understand why every Samoan on that island is related except for Joe. How is he not related to any of these? Because the Fatus just keep coming out of the woodwork. Who knew Rikishi had
And
so many kids and grandkids and nieces and nephews and but anyway, yeah.
I, there are so many, and it's impressive that that much talent can come from one family. But don't sleep on Jacob Fatu and think he is just another in a long line. He is special. Honestly, he could be one of my absolute favorites of the current generation from the Fatu family. So it would be a shame for I can't imagine a world now that he's a free agent from MLW that he doesn't end up in WWE as part of the Bloodline storyline. But hey, if he shows up in AEW instead, I'm also fine with that. He needs the bigger stage. If you've not seen him work, fans, you're in for a treat.
I gotta believe that we're gonna start seeing a lot more Samoans again going to WrestleMania. Whatever this story is going to be, we're gonna see a lot more bloodline showing up, uh, calling out the bloodline, calling out family members.
Fingers crossed, Jacob
Right?
Fatu's part of that.
Yes.
Quick programming note resulting from WWE getting ready to travel to Australia for the Elimination Chamber. That's the fans attending the February 16th edition of SmackDown in Salt Lake City, Utah will get double their money's worth as the broadcast will be the live version of SmackDown. And then following the taping of the next week's SmackDown in order for the
Oh,
WWE's cast and crew to make their way down to Australia. A bit of a jaunt.
what about 30 hours or so? It's hardly nothing.
File this next one, Doug, under the category of not the best of ideas, but Mick Foley
Got a
at
lot of those,
50.
Kevin. My file's pretty big for those, but I'll find room
Well,
for it.
make room for Mick Foley at 58 years old and 14 years, mind you, after his
Oh
last
dear.
singles match,
No,
indicating that he has one more match in him that he would like to do before he turns 60. Mick being Mick, of course, it can't just be, I want to have a match. No, Mick Foley wants to have a death match.
of course he
Yep.
does.
He indicated one major reason for this is that the last time he made a return to the ring, he lost more than 100 pounds. He has more than 100 pounds he'd like to lose again and thinks this would motivate him to be in shape. Obviously, you got to be. I mean, Doug, I know how you like to get in shape before your death matches.
I'm working on one right now. I'm getting ready for it. December.
Man, when asked what current star he'd like to face and have that death match against, Mick
Moxley.
said
Come
that
on,
oh, you know it's Moxley.
Moxley.
It is, of course, it's John Moxley. John Moxley or Matt Cardona, he
Okay,
said. So, Mick,
okay.
just go enjoy your retirement, Mick. We
Uh,
don't need this. I'm sure your wife and kids definitely don't need this for you.
don't do it, Mick. I mean, you get in shape, sure, dude. Do it. Train like you're going to get back in the ring, but don't get.
But
Yeah,
maybe don't blow yourself up and go through like plate glass windows and barbed wire
flaming
and all the
barbed
death month.
wire like
Yeah,
dead. Yes and no. Pizza
no, not a good
cutters. We
idea.
don't need no pizza cutters, Mick. Come on.
No pizza cutters. So go just enjoy your retirement, Mick. You made
Yeah.
it somehow.
Come
We
on,
don't
dude.
need another from you. You gave enough, my friend. You gave enough.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Doug,
absolutely.
we're going to wrap our news segment, and I guess it's appropriate having just had the Super Bowl. But I would like to say congratulations on behalf of the Two Bros Wrestling Show to former WCW star and one-time Four Horseman Steve Mongo McMichaels. McMichael. He was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. McMichael played defensive tackle for the Chicago Bears from 1981 to 1993, which included a Super Bowl in '85. Doug, this honors all. I mean, Mongo was never my favorite wrestler, and it's certainly not the classic rendition of the Horseman. I found him entertaining, and I'm just glad this happened for him. While he would be aware and could maybe hopefully
Right.
appreciate it. He's had some really bad health the last few years. He was diagnosed with ALS otherwise known as Lou Gehrig's disease, which is a horrendous disease that steals quite a bit away from you. So I'm hopeful that Mongo is able to enjoy the recognitions, the recognition. Congratulations, Mongo.
Absolutely. Congratulations, Mongo. And I do have to agree with you. Just an odd pairing once you get it outside of your original four. Any replacement horsemen they just didn't hit it right for me, man. But that's probably a
Yeah.
show unto itself we could do about the horsemen.
I'll make a note.
Make a note. There's my contribution to our backside of stuff.
Doug, you contribute a lot. Don't sell yourself short tonight. In fact, I want to start by saying I love you, bro.
Bro, I love you. Come on. It's the Two Bros Wrestling Show. There is such a bro romance here.
If any show, man, if any show was meant to talk about the bromance, it would be the two guys that called themselves the Two Bros, right?
Bro.
Our main event topic tonight is a Valentine's special, and that is the history of the Wrestling Bromance. Doug, we've done a Valentine's. I don't think we've ever been on Valentine's Day. A couple years back, though, I know we did a Valentine's show on the history of romance and wrestling, all the relationship angles, the wrestling weddings. And yes, those are honestly very memorable. But as memorable as those storylines have been, if you think about it, though, there are way more examples of non-romantic relationships between dudes that have formed the backbone of professional wrestling than any male-female pairing. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight, Doug, is the wrestling bromance, why it's important, and its history. To start, I guess we should probably define what is a bromance, because a wrestling bromance, I mean, we have tons of tag teams, but it's more than just being partners, right?
Right. And, I'm not sure how much we want to touch on brothers, actual brothers, too. I'm not sure, because
there's the family you have, and then there's a family you make. And I think that, to me, a wrestling bromance is those stories where they're portrayed as much as friends as they are partners. There's lots of partners, and I think a lot of tag teams, to me, always feel like they're a unit. They're one working together. But I think
the good tag teams are a unit. I think for so long, and a lot of younger wrestling fans are probably more conditioned for tag teams being two guys just thrown together. When we think of wrestling tag teams, we're thinking guys who dress the same, guys who carry a name. It's not this guy and this guy together. Yeah.
And to me, though, a lot of times I think that it's the real life friends from behind the scenes that are portrayed as friends on the screen and have long careers where they kind of intertwine with each other, as opposed to the tag team where maybe you're in the tag team at the beginning and you're still in the tag team at the end. When I think of, to me, the most famous, in my opinion, bromances, they've tended to be single stars who just can't get enough of each other and end up in tag teams together, end up as enemies together, then they're tag teams, and they follow each other. I mean, there's so many examples of this. A lot of it is because of the fact that they are, in many cases, friends in real life, and because of that, follow one another, especially in the old days when there were places to go other than just a few. They would go territory to territory, and their paths would continue to cross. I guess the wrestling bromance advantage to the wrestling bromance storyline is, I guess, should be kind of obvious, because we as viewers view these guys as close. It makes it more dramatic when the inevitable breakup occurs, right? Sets the scene for betrayal, which sets the scene for storyline possibilities.
Absolutely.
What's the first bromance in wrestling that you think you recognized as, okay, these guys are not just tag partners, these guys aren't just in the same faction, these guys are tight?
You know what? I think, to me, in my mind, because I have to make this distinction, because the first tag team I truly remember, Ricky Steamboat, Jay Youngblood. that is old school tag team for me. Of course, the not necessarily a legendary tag team. You don't hear those two names brought up a lot, but I think the first real bromance that I've actually recognized didn't come until my late teen years when I realized how close Triple H and Shawn Michaels had to be functioning like they did. I didn't know about the click, or the bigger, thing behind the scenes, but these two guys, well, they clearly clicked,
I
and then of
like the
course when
call out though of Steamboat and Youngblood, because that's a perfect example of an early one. They weren't the Rock and Roll Express. They weren't,
right.
always paired together. They were singles guys who had a
Mhm.
formidable tag team and were legitimately close in real life, or seemed to be. That would be a good example.
Seemed to
And
be, right.
Triple H and Shawn Michaels is another perfect example. That's a very classic example. For me, though, I'm going to go back and say the first one I think that I recognized as, oh, this is a little different. Rick and Arn.
Well,
Um,
okay. Yeah.
they were friends in real life. They portrayed themselves on screen as cousins. I think
Mhm.
that it started by them being put together in the Four Horsemen, but we mentioned Mongo earlier. Like there's only two people that were in every version of the Four Horsemen:
Uh-huh.
Rick and
Yeah.
Arn.
Rick and
Even
Arn.
outside of the Horsemen, Rick and Arn were often seen together, paired together, and that's because they were really, really tight. To me, again, seeing Rick and Arn outside of the faction, and then over the course of 20 years, intersect repeatedly with each other's worlds. You mentioning Triple H and Shawn Michaels, who are continuing to be in each other's worlds to this day,
Right?
they just seemed more like the bromance than, say, the guys in Demolition, for example, that's a
Oh, yeah.
team.
Yeah.
That's just a team, and you think of them
Mhm.
as a unit, not these best friend type of
Right.
guys.
Right. Yeah, uh, you know, I really hadn't even thought about that because I even think of the Horsemen as a larger unit, not even a bromance. I know we've talked about the Rick and Arn before, but it really never clicked with me when I was younger that recognized what was going on there because I think Rick and Arn are like these two like hardcore dudes, not like Mick Foley hardcore, but they are real man's men kind of guys where you know
Yeah,
Sean and Triple H are more like man children, especially the whole DX gimmick. Especially as I've gotten older and it's just gotten into really bad dad jokes. But you know, I think there's two very different, bromances there. You got your really manly man, Rick and Rick and Arn, and then Triple H, Shawn Michaels. Two very different, but very, very much bromances.
I was going to say very much bromances, and even though they're like you said, the style they presented both on the
Right.
screen and behind the scenes was maybe a little different. Although I don't know, I'd argue behind the scenes, at least at the beginning, they sound fairly similar
Well,
to the
yeah.
shenanigans. But that again, that's not to say that bromances can't exist with tag teams, but it just does seem to me that you know your Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn's, your Daniel Bryan's and Kane's are more likely to be portrayed on screen as a
Mhm.
bromance than the Freebirds, Rock and Roll Express, the Road
Yes.
Warriors. You think of those guys as tight, like brothers, but
Hmm.
maybe more like family. We're all in together, whereas the bromance are friends that continue to be in each other's worlds.
Right. I mean, because if we're going to talk about Triple H and Shawn Michaels, we also have to talk about Nash and Hall, or Hall and Nash, or as Jerry, your wife,
Yeah.
thinks that they're one. Holland Nash is one person named Holland Nash.
Yeah,
But
let's talk
Ho-
about some of the ones through history. Hall and Nash are very much in the vein of the Triple H Shawn Michaels that you
absolutely. I
mentioned.
mean, they're all in the
They
click. So
followed, yeah, they were in the clique. They came out of that, which was a real life friendship and but behind the scenes, it wasn't an on screen faction. It was
right.
behind the scenes faction.
Yeah.
And then when one goes down to WCW to follow the big money from WWE, the other follows because, as we stipulated at the beginning, a lot of times these bromances were not just a moment in time. They were,
Right.
we follow each other around. We promotion are in it together,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
Thinking of some of the more famous bromances in wrestling history, I say Rick and Arn was the first I remember, but I guess around the same time, I wasn't as much as of a WWF kid. I watched it all,
Right.
but I
Yep.
definitely leaned heavier to more heavy on the NWA side of things. But
Mhm.
we would be remiss if we didn't say maybe one of the biggest bromances in wrestling history, because they maybe weren't really always close in real life, but they definitely were portrayed as close, had a moment where they're close, and were always intertwined in each other's careers for years. The Mega Powers, Savage and Hogan.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, Hulk Hogan
Yeah.
defending the honor of Liz, and then the jealousy angle of, and that was played up like, I mean, the Mega Powers, the two biggest stars in wrestling, decide, hey, we're singles, and that's a good example of the
It
prototype. Uh,
right, pushing these two singles, like you say, together to make something bigger than both of them,
Bigger.
especially when you're talking like Savage and Hogan, you know, two huge personalities to begin with, smashing them together. It's not peanut butter and chocolate. It doesn't go together at first. It becomes an acquired taste, and then you're like, okay, yeah, this is pretty good. This is really good stuff after a while.
And when Savage ultimately did what everyone saw coming, but still,
Right,
now suddenly you went from how could anyone ever beat the tag team of the two guys who just can't be beat, and they joined forces.
right.
Well, they destroyed themselves from within, and now you
Yep.
have instant storyline, instant classic matches between Hogan and Savage, and they would reprise that basic template uh, decade later in WCW as well.
Yep.
How about
So
Eddie and Ray?
Eddie and Ray. Yeah, man. I hadn't even thought about that.
I
I
mean,
always
more. I mean, they were portrayed almost like family, even though they weren't
uh-huh.
family. And that meant the ultimate betrayal there, gets old Tom and Nick involved as a child or as
Um,
children. Would it be?
yep. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, Eddie was
Wow.
his uncle in all but actual bloodline there, but the way they portrayed that on screen with the portrayal of Eddie saying that he was Tom's real
Mhm.
dad, and I mean all of that was so memorable and really could only work in the context of before they could get to that being the big painful situation being portrayed for Dom. We all, as viewers, had to believe that these guys were as tight as family. And now
Mhm.
look what Eddie's doing.
You know, I I think, for a lot of, like, the ones you're bringing up, there's this really weird I have a really hard time disconnecting let's say, the artist from the art in a lot of these, because I keep thinking, like, these behind the scenes, and I'm like, "Well, of course, dude, those guys were tight. That's not what this is about," but, I can't get that out of my brain. I'm not sure if any viewers are having the same problems, but, yeah, but you're absolutely right. That on-screen chemistry there, and it works so much better because these guys are tight behind scenes too. I think those always have so much more impact, just like Sammy and KO throughout the years. Steen
I
and
was
El
going to. That's
Generico.
exactly
Yeah,
that's exactly where I was going to ask you next. If I said Kevin Owens and asked you to name another wrestler, who would you say?
Sammy. I mean,
Sammy.
Kevin Steen, El Generico, Sammy, Kevin. Yeah, it's been going on literally for years, and it works. They're friends, they're enemies, they're frenemies. They're killing each other. They're saving each other's lives
They
throughout
were
multiple.
legitimately in each other's weddings as best men,
Yes,
because
yes.
that's how again, they were not the Rock and Roll Express. They weren't a lifelong tag team. But
Mhm.
if there's going to be a tag team situation for those men, it will be with one another. And then when the blood feud happens, it will be with one another. And they've reprised that role starting in Ring of Honor to
Right?
basically every promotion and part of the globe that they've been in since. They have recreated this storyline over and over again. And even though we've seen it a few times in WWE, if they went back to it 2 or 3 years from now, it will probably still be great. And no, you and I will not complain.
Absolutely, I would be all for it because every time it's done, it is done in such a great way. Because, and I think, going back to Triple H and Shawn Michaels too with this, or even Hall and Nash, when they turn on each other and they're working against each other, it's so much better because these are dudes who, again, I'm having trouble separating this in my brain anyway, that, are tight behind the scenes. They work great together. They can put together a great match. It just works so much better when it's like that, together or apart.
And maybe, Doug, I don't know. Maybe it says something about Kevin Owens as being someone who would make a really good friend, because I realized when composing this list, yes, Sammy is definitely his person because they're real life friends. But
I've got another one with KO too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How entertaining. And again, maybe it's because Kevin's not only seems like he'd be a really cool guy, but also he's hilarious. Put him with another really hilarious singles wrestler, Kevin Owens, Chris Jericho. Yes. How great was all of that, right?
Yes, I got it in my notes too. Absolutely. Because,
I mean, that is a bromance.
Yes,
I don't know if they're tight in real life, but they sure made you feel like they were.
Yep. Yeah. Because, that's, again, having trouble separating, because when I'm making my list and, just making my notes, I'm like, do these people, are they actually tight? I'm like, it doesn't matter, Doug. This is all what we're talking about here. The bromances like this that, bring people together because they're together. I mean, the best ones really are the ones that are just smashed together, like nonsensically smashed together, like Jericho and KO. Or Jericho. Come on, let's talk about
Jericho. Yeah,
Jericho and the Big Show.
Actually, maybe we hit on something there, because the common links in some of these being Kevin Owens and Jericho, they have great minds for the business. They're both can be hilarious when they want to be, but also serious when they need to be. Jericho was one of those opportunists that was funny and you could laugh at him, or eventually he's going to turn on whatever partner he has.
Yes.
So he made a good foil for a bromance storyline, because he was your best friend 1 minute, and then the moment that he had an opportunity to stab you in the back, he's going to do it.
He's going to do it.
You mentioned Hall and Nash. Obviously had them on my notes too. Triple H and Shawn Michaels. To me, that is the Flair Anderson model put together in a stable, but became best friends for life. Good on-screen enemies. I think it's interesting now, though, that Triple H and Shawn Michaels are continuing their romance by being creative executives to work that pipeline from NXT to Raw and SmackDown. Doug, I know that they're often, at least in the early days, were considered a tag. I mean, more like, oh, these two guys are tag wrestlers, but they both overcame that to be big single stars on their own. But they attended wrestling shows as kids together. Edge and Christian, they're still doing that storyline in AEW now.
They're on my list too, because again, I have that. Where do these people actually fall? But yeah, Edge and Christian, because they're tight on screen, they're tight off screen. It's because we are going to get a 5-second pose off at some point in the future in AEW once Edge and Christian resolve what they're going through now. I'm sorry, Edge or Adam Copeland and Christian Cage. Christian Cage resolve their issues. There will come a time when we're going to see those two in a tag team again in AEW. That's the end goal there. It has to be. But, like you said, these guys have been going together to wrestling shows when they were kids, talking about making it to the WWE. They skyrocketed past that. One arguably had a much bigger career and was a much larger single star. But, let's not count Christian out. He's an entertaining guy who's had
a multiple-time world champion.
Exactly.
I mean, exactly. In Impact. And I think that they are a great example, and so is KO and Sammy, of you see the temptation there from the point of writers and bookers. It's always there for you. they're doing it right now in AEW, even though we've seen it 1,000 times. And,
Right.
since the late 90s, early 2000s, we've seen the former tag team, real life best friends pitted against one another. And it always works. So why,
Always.
it's always there for you if you need it for a storyline. Give it a rest for a little bit in time. But if
Mhm.
you go back to it, the fans will still respond to it. And I think it's because of the real connection between an Edge and a Christian. That's why we
Mhm.
still care while watching it play out yet again on AEW. I'm not tired of it. I think it's been entertaining.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because again, we know what we want to see as fans, especially like, kids from the early 90s watching Edge and Christian. We know what we want to see there. We know what this end game is, but it doesn't get old. And and they're doing it in multiple storylines with in AEW right now because I think we have our most recent bromance that just went terribly south. What, in December? Yeah. December when we finally find out who the devil was.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
absolutely. They played that up. And again, what's the underlying link there? Maybe they're not real friends in real life, but they both are major singles wrestlers who
right.
were on a collision course with each other that became unlikely best friends.
Right.
Um,
And they do it through the it was forced. It really was a forced narrative that they used. Here's like our, I don't know, one of those Tony Khan tournaments, the like random tag team tournaments, roll the dice or whatever. Okay, you guys both got sixes. You're in a tag team together, kind of a thing. But it worked. The we were ham fisted into it, but it worked for us. We got something really good out of it.
so I did, and I don't know why that one being a recent example was not on my list. I want to pivot back to that in a second because
Okay.
I think that falls under a specific category of bromance that
Oh,
I want to talk about. But
perfect.
before I leave the I guess more standard to do, I have an outlier here before I get to that subgenre. So I know, to me, I know I said earlier that the best romances have tended to my mind be guys in non-named tag teams, two singles wrestlers who were a
Right.
team on occasion. I have one notable exception to that in my mind,
All right.
and that's because of the way they stopped being tag team wrestlers.
Okay.
The Midnight Rockers. The Midnight Rockers in
Okay.
AEWA transitioned the WWF at the time, named just the Rockers. They were a named tag team
Okay.
guys,
Uh-huh.
but they were portrayed as close as friends. And because they were
Right.
portrayed as close friends, when Shawn Michaels turned on Marty Jannetty, it became the most famous tag
Yeah.
team breakup in history, to the point that all tag teams for the last 30 years have been analyzed as which one's going to be the Shawn and which one
Uh-huh.
is going to be the Marty. And that's
Yeah.
because they broke up and weren't a tag team after that, unlike many of the other tag teams. I think they're the
Mhm.
notable exception to the rule, as they portrayed it as a bromance so that we felt more of the betrayal when
Yep.
Shawn took care of business there for Marty Jannetty.
That's
And
fair.
kind of put the
That's
nail in the coffin of his career, to be quite honest.
yeah.
Of course, I guess Marty
Definitely.
did enough to do that himself.
Yeah. Yeah. But and that's probably enough for another show right there. With
Uh,
just Marty and Shawn.
and sort of in the vein of that, because I figure it is coming, it just hasn't happened yet. Um, I don't know who's turning on who, but when you have the tag team, when you actually have a named tag team that you call the best friends, somebody in that group is going to betray a friend, and at some point,
No,
whenever
not the
they pull
best
the trigger for it,
friends.
it's going
No,
to happen, man.
they're
It's going to.
aren't they, okay, so here's an aside because I was thinking about this last night. Aren't all the best friends in chaos anyway? Isn't best friends like just like American chaos? Is that kind of what that is?
Is Orange Cassidy in?
I think Orange is also, yeah, because isn't
Oh,
Tomohiro Ishii in chaos as well? So didn't we have
he
like a
is.
chaos
Yeah.
versus yeah, so I think everybody in In the comments, let me know if I'm right or wrong about that. I'm pretty sure all the best friends are in chaos. Not that chaos hasn't turned on each other in the past, but
as best friends do.
as best friends do. I mean, yeah, exactly. But
Doug, better than you, baby. I love that you brought that one up, and I don't know how that one escaped me, but
dude,
I would like to turn to that subgenre of the bromance that I wanted to make its own separate category because it is totally a bromance. But I think there is a slight difference to the way it's portrayed. This one is the bromance where it is a obsession that one wrestler has with
oh,
another, often unwanted by the second guy, but then
okay,
reluctantly accepted. So these odd couple pairings that end up working even though
gotcha.
they shouldn't. I think the most famous example of this, the prime example, really, because it's sort of the template in my mind, the Rock and Sock connection.
Yes. Yes.
You got two huge single stars that were nothing alike, should not be in a tag team. Neither of them needed to be in a tag team. But for the time they were in the tag team, it worked really well because Mick Foley was obsessed with the idea. The Rock was reluctant to the idea. But then that becomes the whole template for this type of wrestling bromance. And I think that the interesting thing about this one, and you kind of could say that the KO Jericho one sort of fell into
Yes.
that. Definitely Adam and MJF did until they both got on the same
Absolutely.
page about it.
Right.
But in general, I think these kind of obsession pairings are oftentimes played for comedy and not necessarily for they're not out there like in blood feuds or going for
Right.
tag team championships. It's usually more for comic relief storylines up until the ultimate, betrayal and falling out. Like it was all fun and games and hilarious skits until Adam Cole revealed himself and his real intentions. It's that sort of thing. But don't you
Right.
think these kind of pairings are tend to be more comedic?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I know we're talking about bros here, but do we give an honorable mention to like the whole Mickey James angle
Uh,
when she originally came
I,
into?
I was going to get there. I was going to
WWE?
get there
Okay,
too.
okay, sorry, I'm stepping all over you. Sorry,
No,
but
no, no,
since
no.
we're there,
Because I think,
you know,
yeah, but that's an example of like somebody's unhealthily obsessed with another.
yes.
And that one maybe not so much for comedy, but Brock and Sock definitely for comedy. MJF,
Mhm.
Adam Cole for comedy. Um, Team Hell No, obviously another famous
Hell no.
example.
Yes.
Booker T, Goldust.
I forgot about Booker T Gold.
And another recent example, you had the most recent with Adam and MJF, but how about
Right.
you can't talk about bromances without mentioning the original bro, Matt Riddle's unhealthy obsession with Randy Orton.
Come on, it's called RK Bro. The team.
It was a perfect example of the obsession,
Absolutely.
reluctant bromance. But back to what you said to wrap it up, Doug, I wanted to make this as a declaration that despite the word bro being associated with
Mm,
men, there is definitely such thing as the female bromance. And they have worked very well in women's in women's wrestling history as well. You mentioned obviously the very famous obsession related storyline of Mickey James and Trish Stratus, but I
yeah.
would go even farther to say the female bromance may actually have a longer history in professional wrestling than the male bromance,
Interesting.
because what what do you think of when you think who do you think of when I say Mae Young?
Oh my gosh, Moolah. I think Moolah. Moolah and
Can
Mae
you
Young.
think of any two wrestlers, male or female, that were so linked
Right.
together for as long? How
Flair.
many decades were May and Moolah in one another's circle on and
Right.
off screen?
Wow. Yeah. You know
70
what?
years. It was a long time from the time that they were young women up
Yeah.
until they were elderly women. They were true best friends.
Amazing. Those two never even crossed my mind. Nowhere in my notes or anything like that. But my goodness, that may be the first bromance. Is that a sheep
Yeah,
bromance? What do we call that?
exactly. It it,
What
it
is
needs
that?
another name because honestly, that's not fair to the women. They
No.
invented the bromance. May and Moolah set the template. And I didn't think about it until I came up and thought, there is this subgenre of they're not just best friends. There's the
Right?
unhealthy obsession. And that made me think, well, wait a minute, that's Mickey and Trish. That is a
Mhm.
bromance. And that made me
Yeah.
think, what other women pair? And I thought, May and
Wow.
Moolah. Who in the
Yeah.
world is more friends for longer, portrayed on screen and real life off than those two?
Wow. Wow.
And acknowledging that we have definitely a misnomer and misname of romance,
Mhm.
when it's really the plutonic friendship, I guess. But what is going on right now, in the last few years in women's wrestling, other than basically, well, actually, before I get into that, the antecedent. I realize Trish, Mickey, yes, but Trish, Lita,
Mhm.
um, they were the two top talents of their generation, portrayed as enemies. In real life,
Right.
became besties, still
Yep.
besties, but it still works. We saw recently when they had both had
Absolutely.
a cup of coffee return, they went right back to, hey, these ladies are best friends. We all know it. They have a history together, and boom, one turns on
Yep.
the other, still works.
Still works
Where I
every
got
time.
almost ahead of myself is the modern example of that. Would you say the Trish and Lita of their generation would be the trio now of what we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years, on and off with Becky, Charlotte,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
um, yeah, Becky, Charlotte, Sasha? I mean, the three of them, sort
Right.
of like a trio female bromance.
Occasionally you sprinkle Bailey in there, and you have the original four horsewomen of NXT. But I think more now it goes back and forth with Becky Charlotte more than even well Sasha, if she were in the WWE, may still have a voice. So, and I think Bailey's doing her own thing, but it always does come back around to Becky and Charlotte. I think that's
And
the
why does that work? Because
right,
that in real life they were any
right.
combination of those four came up together. They
Mhm.
arguably are the best four of their generation, just like
Mhm.
Lita and Trish were back in the day. And with the added twist of now, because we all know everything that's happening behind the scenes, we
Mhm.
know that in real life that friendship was frayed and tested. So when they portray that on screen,
Yep.
we believe it as real.
Yeah.
Doug, I would say that to maybe wrap this up, and again on the female bromance side, we're seeing one play out right now in one of WWE's best storylines going into Mania, and that is the dissolution of Damage Control. Bailey being ousted from her own creation by basically a group of mean girls who she thought were her
Yes.
friends, but are making fun of her behind her back. That is definitely not just tag team faction material. That's a relationship going sour when the
Yes, it
person that
is.
you love, your best friends, are actually making fun of you, and we all can relate to that sense of betrayal, which is why it resonates.
And it's why I learned to speak Japanese. So,
Hey, wait a minute. Uh-oh. Are we seeing it play out on the Two Bros Wrestling Show? Do I have to put you through a barbershop window?
that would be awesome. We should do that sometime.
We should do that
Uh,
sometime. For now, we'll wrap by saying because there's such a history of it working so well, the Wrestling Bromance will continue to be a presence in the industry. It is not going anywhere anytime soon. And don't worry, Doug,
so
I
true.
won't really put you through a barbershop window.
It's okay. I really can't speak Japanese.
I I love you, bro.
I love you, bro.
Big finish time, Doug.
Big finish. I don't even have my notebook tonight. I don't even know where it is, but I can just shoot this off the top of my head
Well,
like I'm very
obviously we got two shows this week, so we're going to talk about the week past when it comes to this.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
so yeah, we'll have plenty of time on this Sunday show to talk about this week. So I'm going to say for my botch of the week, we'll want to start with botch if that's okay.
Let's do botches because I got some complaints about an entire show. So
Oh, an entire show. That might take more
entire
time than mine. So I'm going to say Tony Khan's big announcement on Big Business. No, I don't mean that he said that they're about to generate big business. He
right.
literally hyped for a week what ended up being just a specially named broadcast of his Wednesday night broadcast, which is teased. I mean, yes, I get it. It's probably going to be something pretty big on the night of big business, but this goes back into the history of Tony Khan teasing an announcement of an announcement. This is what this was.
I agree, man, because I thought that was ridiculous. I was hoping you
I
call
mean,
that out too,
yeah,
because
fans were expecting it was either going to, oh, is it Okada or is it finally, the former Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné? Yes,
right.
it probably will be from all reports. That's probably what he kind of hyped, but
right.
that announcement will actually happen here in a couple of weeks when big business takes place. So essentially, he teased an announcement, which was still just another tease.
And it was really just that I'm going to call this Wednesday night show Big Business. It's going to be in Boston, nudge, nudge, for those, if you know, you know, but come on.
Tony, watch our last broadcast about what needs to be done to fix the AEW. We called this out, and then the man goes and teases a tease.
So, it's gonna be Pile on Tony night again, but
we had a whole show last time piling on Tony. It's okay to pile on the end.
I know. I mean, we've piled on WWE so much in the past. It's Tony's turn. I mean, it all can't be like unicorns and rainbows all the time. But I don't know what's going on with Collision. But the whole show, I mean, there are great wrestlers and great wrestling on this show, but it was just so clunky and just cumbersome and just so off. And I know we've talked about like the production before, but you had if I had to just pick one thing, just one thing, because two really just got my goat, but one thing was, first Adam Copeland, talking down Eddie Kingston almost like an afterthought about chasing after Eddie's belts, and then realizing what he did and then kind of correcting himself, right? And you're trying to bring it back around. And then the camera work, the poor camera work, where you have, Mark Briscoe go through a table, but there's nobody to catch him go through the table. He just gets pushed off from somewhere. And then there's, another cameraman runs around to get a little bit of it. That spot was set up 10 minutes before. Why weren't they ready for that? Oh, but Collision as a whole.
That's because you don't have CM Punk running everything, Doug. When you had one man as your center, he pulled it all together.
Dude, Punk was actually good on Punk was good on Collision. I think when it was Punk's show, it probably was a little bit better. And I've got to say, after watching Punk do color commentary and basically joke about punching people in the face, it's like, oh yeah, here's where I need to separate the person from the art from the artist, because he is good at what he does.
Good at what he does.
I like Cody, but
I'm going to say for my performance of the week, Doug, there were a lot of people who are factoring into my performance of the week that are good at what they do.
Yes,
I'm calling this whole WWE press conference on Thursday night the performance of the week. The entire
Chef's kiss. Absolutely.
Man, absolutely. I don't know. Truthfully, I don't know. Are they just trying to turn lemons into lemonade? Or was this the plan the whole time and we're all just being worked? I honestly don't care. And I love that I don't care. It was so entertaining. Everyone hit all the beats, played their roles so perfectly. I'm just content to sit back, go for the ride, and see how it turns out. I know last week you called out, rightfully so, how it was all handled to begin with. Well, I don't know if it was a pivot or if we just needed to wait for chapter 2, but now they have me hook, line, and sinker. It reminds me of the excitement I had with wrestling as a kid, unburdened by knowing the behind the scenes happenings or how the business works. I know that seems hypocritical for a man who does a wrestling podcast with his best friend.
What?
But it's sometimes nice to not know,
It
genuinely not know, and not watch through the lens of, oh, this is going on, that's good. I just enjoyed the show for being the show. And on Thursday night, it was just enjoying the execution of what I was seeing. And I hope they plan on doing more of that throughout Mania season, because now I just want to see where it goes. And
Yes.
the backdrop of what's going on behind the scenes, I'm interested in, but it doesn't really matter in the end as long as what is on screen is entertaining. What was on screen was incredibly entertaining.
So entertaining. And I'm with you. I don't know if we got worked. I don't care if we got worked. If we did, that's awesome, because how
Yeah,
often do old smarks like us actually get worked? The burden of knowledge is so much to like
a
old
burden of
wrestling
knowledge.
fans,
I like that. Yeah, 100%. I like that.
But and just the information we have access to, at our fingertips. We can just hop on this thing and find out what Meltzer's doing, or what Sean Ross Sapp is saying, and we have direct injection into the backstage. But to not know, to think we know, even better. I'm loving it, and it was excellent. It was some great wrestling cinema, is what it was, and not cinematic wrestling, but wrestling cinema.
Doug, I would argue it was so good
Hmm.
that I would be fine with any combination that it ends up being at Mania. If they can sustain that all the way through, they might be able to fill both nights with multiple matches that
Yes.
have this level of intrigue in a way that maybe they wouldn't have had they just gone the straight route.
I am inclined to agree, and I love that, there's so much information out there, and just little sprinkles of conflicting information to make, well, that story doesn't quite make sense if you look at this, but if you look at that, we're going to be dissecting this. This is the Montreal screw job, okay? We're going to be dissecting this for years. Who knew what? When did they know? What was real? What was a
True.
shoot?
Yeah.
That's what this is going to be.
I had non-wrestling friends or friends who haven't been into wrestling since the 90s reach out to me
Yeah,
and
right
ask,
there with you.
is this real? Is this
Hmm.
really going on? What's going on? And because you're having to ask yourself, is this real?
Uh-huh.
Um, it again unburdens us from
Yes.
always having the knowledge of what's going on behind the scenes. If we got worked, kudos to everyone involved. It's so hard to get a surprise over on wrestling fans these days because we know way
Mhm.
too much in general.
Way too
Um,
much.
make it entertaining. I don't care anymore. It's
Yep.
fabulous. Is that your
Make
performance of the week too? I
Absolutely it
presume.
is. Yes, absolutely.
If you're a wrestling fan, how could that not be the performance of the week? It was so
Right?
well done. My favorite hour of wrestling all week was a press conference.
Yes.
That's how well done it was.
I mean, that was the best part of yeah, it really was the best part of wrestling this week. It I can't stress that enough, especially like the last, like, what, 15, 20 minutes or so. I mean,
Oh
that
yeah,
is I was just
gold.
gold. Really.
Doug, how about your match of the week?
So, I took a big old dump on Tony and his product earlier, so I'm going to swing back around and do my penance now. And we talked about all these members of Chaos earlier, but man, sometimes I just really love a good, these two flavors don't go together. It kind of goes with the bromance thing. And we also mentioned the best friends earlier, but Orange Cassidy and Ishii going at it, because Ishii is just a beast. I love that wrestler. He's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
got this such a unique thing going on, the Stone Pitbull thing. And then you got Orange Cassidy and so many false finishes after it was that great classically programmed wrestling. Hit these spots here, you do this here, you do this here. It just keeps building and keeps building and keeps building. And then they finally get into like that final stretch, and it's just false finish after false finish. And then when the roll up comes, it's like, well, he's going to kick it. Oh no, he got him that time. And then poor Ishii's just so just downtrodden
dejected.
afterwards. But sometimes they don't have to be the flippy floppy, jumpy, high fly things, which I love. I love the flippy flopper high flyers. Love that stuff. But yeah,
Great match on Collision.
it was. Yeah, I mean, that opening match on Collision with Blackpool Combat and CMML guys was great too. But I could go on a rant about that too. Where's my CMLL invasion? What did you do? You teased an invasion and then you didn't do it. But I'm cutting into your match of the week time, Kevin. Sorry.
I'm going back to last Sunday and calling out the work of the NXT crew. That main event of NXT Judgment Day, Ilya
Yeah.
Dragunov versus Trick Williams for the NXT Championship. Fantastic match, fantastic story, and then included brilliantly with a well-executed heel turn by Carmelo Hayes that had been months and months
Right.
and months in the making. We all knew it was coming, but when it happened at the right moment to make it impactful. Now that I think about it, an example of
Yes.
a bromance.
Yes.
Carmelo
Yes.
Hayes and Trick Williams was the ultimate example and the most recent example of that turn of those friendships breaking up. And it just happened to come on the heels of a main event match that totally delivered. It was the third in the series. Obviously, Ilya's title reign will continue. No one would get mad, though, if in a bit of time they would revisit that feud. I think, however, that for Carmelo and Trick, that their next big matches and appearances they may very well be in the WWE's main roster after WrestleMania. I figure they play out this feud for a little bit going into Mania season. These two guys are coming to the main roster soon. Great work by all three men, but go watch that match if you didn't see Ilya and Trick from last week.
And a great way to end. You end with the
On a
match
bromance.
on a bromance that comes to a tragic end, as all bromances eventually do in wrestling.
Hopefully, your Valentine's Day isn't coming to a tragic end if you're watching us on the night that we drop this show.
What a
But
segue.
thank you
Thank you
for tuning in on a
thank you
Wednesday night.
Is it Wednesday? It is? Okay, it
Yeah,
is. I don't even know
it
what
is.
day it is. See, if
It's
we don't do a Sunday and I'm lost.
We will do a Sunday in just a few days. We're back at our regular night and time. We're on a different day tonight and a tad bit earlier so that you can pregame with us prior to Dynamite. We have you covered all the way around. As you can see from the scroll of our shows coming up, we got a bunch of premium live events on the way. We're going to review them. We're going to preview them starting this Sunday. We're going to talk Elimination Chamber, 8:00 Eastern time, live here on Facebook. On demand on both Facebook and YouTube. Follow along. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Until then, go watch some wrestling, everybody. Thanks.